to ban early child marriages. And I think you have leadership across the board saying this may have been a practice of the past, but this we cannot say, this is African culture and we're going to stick by it. We as Africans are going to change this, and that is what's going to make the difference. When the country itself, its leadership, its people, particularly its young people, say no more, we're not going to practice this anymore because it's hurtful and harmful, culture changes.
We're also seeing something that I know you have also strongly spoken against, is the rise of violence against, you know, women. Again, we're talking GBV every so often.
You know, on that one, I feel that, again, it's one of these things that we can go on talking for years and years on this issue. But until a few bold moves are taken, for example, if the crime of rape is made a highly punishable, non-bailable offense, we will see a difference. If we can fast-track those cases, and I know the justice system is working on both these issues with the courts, we will fast-track those cases, we will see a difference. So again, it is what has been allowable in our space, in our social space. The minute that changes, and there's a punitive, strong punitive process put in place, and these cases are brought to justice, there's no negotiation and mediation outside of court, because most of these cases don't make it to court, right? Once these stop and that punishment kicks in, we will see a drop in these cases of gender-based violence. Now, that is not to say that there also shouldn't be continued education and social awareness of the power relations and the issues that make it okay that children and women, but also some men, that they get beaten. So that is another, that is a social behavior and practice that we've got to say is unacceptable.
Before we move away from aspects of gender equality, would we say that as a world, as a continent, is Africa beginning to achieve this? We've seen Malawi now has a female president. We have the likes of, you know, Sierra Leone. The AU now at its helm have a female chairperson. Are we on the right track? There are some countries, like you give examples to say they are making it. What would be your general analysis?
I would say we are headed in the right direction, but it's you cannot take your eye off the ball. Yeah. It's very easy to reverse the gains made, and the gains are yet small. But I think it comes back to what we started with, education. Because this starts from a very young age of teaching and understanding that people are born equal, that there shouldn't be these differences between men and women, girls and boys, and that violence just should not be an acceptable form of disputes, how you resolve disputes, whether it's domestic disputes or political disputes. And so it starts at a very young age of saying that there's a different way in which we can mediate our differences. And I think there's an increasing awareness and understanding that we can make this change. I strongly believe that.
You did talk about something also that is escalating as regards a huge comparison, inequality towards wages for men and women. You were about to make that point.
You know, that comes with what we're seeing in here, which is a worrying trend of income inequalities. And if you just look at some of the data, again, it's up to 2010. So the hope is in these last couple of years, we're seeing a move away from this and a reversal of it. But even in countries that have been growing at a significant rate, you are seeing growing inequality. And one of it is seen in the wage data. And the fact that the wage differential between urban and rural, and then between men and women, which should be certainly between men and women in the same sector, should be at parity is not the case. And that's where you can put in much stronger labor laws to make sure it happens.
Let's look at goal number 7 about environmental sustainability here again. There have been so many discussions at an international level. Most recently it was COP16 to do with what everybody's talking about, the issue of climate change. Again, disappointingly, there were commitments made out of Kyoto. People came into South Africa for the Durban summit, and then it was real. But all of a sudden it seems that people are, or countries are slowly moving away from those commitments. We seem to be losing the fight on issues of the environment and especially related to climate change.
You know, there'll always be, it's a highly political space on the environment in terms of its global nature. But that doesn't mean that while we should keep pressures up to try and get agreement on climate change targets and mitigation, adaptation, emission targets, etc., that we shouldn't, as each country, take responsible decisions to protect our own local environments. So here, for example, it was very good to see the interest, the renewed energy on reforestation. You know, it's going to take a while to catch up on the forest that we've lost. But it's a start that we see tree planting now being, you know, every child in school is aware of this. Every community, every traditional leader is getting engaged in this. And so I think it's a very healthy trend towards that. Similarly, Zambia has taken a very bold move to ban, for example, the hunting of big cats, elephant, rhino, at least till there's a regeneration of these species here. And that again is something that creates more awareness of saying, well, we've got these resources, how do we protect them, but at the same time have community livelihoods, because people have to live, eat, etc. So what are we giving them as alternatives so they don't burn charcoal and they don't kill wildlife? Those are the questions that policymakers and leaders need to be asking. So you manage, you walk on both feet. And this old argument that if you conserve, you can't create wealth is rubbish. These two things have to happen together if we're really going to be on a more sustainable path.
But still, on that one, let me begin. What is your take on this debate, again, that seemingly is coming off the table? Years back, there was a commitment by superpowers, there was a commitment by industrialized nations to say the will commit should have been about 25% of whatever aid they would give, especially to Africa, based on the fact that countries like China, the US, had more emissions, which were likely to affect Africa the more. But seemingly each government is saying we do not need to do that. Each other country needs to look out on their own. So it's that debate. What should be the dialogue on the table? The world is saying Africa contributes the least to these emissions, but they're worst affected.
I think that global debate, we cannot take the pressure off those promises and those declarations and commitments. We have to try to make them more binding, whether they're politically binding or legally binding within countries' legislation. That has been left voluntarily to countries to take on. But I think certainly as a United Nations, we're committed to make sure that that global pressure is kept on of all countries who have benefited from rapid industrialization and are the large emitters, including the large countries such as China, India, Brazil, who are the more recent industrializing countries, to take a responsible global position and say it's not just about what's going on in your own countries. A more stable, cleaner world is better for you too. You've got to bring it back home and show why a more peaceful, sustainable earth is better for all countries, including for their own policies and politics back home.
But from an African perspective, are we doing enough? Again, taking you back to just, what you said, for a very long time, we've been quite conservative of land and a lot of, resources. But with this hunger for development, you have new projects, big mines and things like that opening day in, day out. They play a part on their own degradation and their own breaking of sustainability of the environment. So where do we see Africa going? Because people are being displaced, animals, water bodies, because of the fact that people want to put up all these mines and other projects.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is where the worry is, that do we have to go down that same path? Just because others went down that path, isn't there a different way to do it? Can we not use cleaner energy? Scientific discoveries have put forward technologies that allow us to leapfrog now, and production is cleaner and can be greener. So why go through the same old path that others went through who destroyed their environments? So the question is, again, whether through more open trade, but through well-regulated systems, whether we can show here in Zambia, in Africa, a cleaner, greener economy that will still create enough wealth, not just for this generation, but those to come. And a really good example, or a basis for this, I would say, is we've got to first know what the true value of the wealth we have.
Before we get into SMSs, from your consultations as the UN, goal number 7, do you look at it as a priority for countries like Zambia and Africa? Because even when I look at the budget, I look at government activities, of course there is tree planting like you've spoken about, but very little aggression and drive coming out of the consequence of climate change. And obviously if we don't use safer and greener energy, we seem not to have a concentration. Very few politicians, if at all, first of all, they understand this. Let's talk about it.
I think the tree planting to me was much more than just planting saplings. It is about a campaign that creates awareness about our environment and about valuing our natural resources. But it's an interesting conversation that started, which is to say, do we know the true value of our waters, our forests, the minerals, etc.? Because without that, you can't really put forward a full economic framework, a regulatory framework that actually will help to conserve and manage these resources over a period of time. So you're right. My hope is that this campaign is just the starting block. You're just off the starting blocks here, but that there'll be a much stronger, as you said, aggressive approach to saying we've got to protect our environment in a way that makes much more sense and will create that wealth and livelihoods, but will do so without destroying everything we have.
Just in case you're joining us, or just in case you're walking in now, we're discussing issues to do with the Millennium Development Goals and obviously the post-2015 consultation project that is ongoing. Director, if we can quickly get into the inbox this evening and see the interactions and questions coming through for our guest, Kanni Wignaraja, who is the resident representative here for the UN. Let's see what is coming through this evening, obviously across Africa, and indeed that is on Facebook, and obviously from our Zambian viewers on our SMS line. Madam, MDGs is, or let me say, are only known by you, the people, at high levels. What are you doing for a common villager to understand what it means? I don't know from which village I suppose that is coming from, but the idea of universal primary education is good, but some learners have reached grade 9 half-baked. That is from Chief Muleka. It's basically a comment. Again, I think Kanni did allude to the fact that what kind of system are we having. The issue of HIV is getting better in Zambia in terms of stigmatization. People are free to take ARVs, but is there an annually drug for HIV, and if so, why not have it in Zambia? Okay, why MDGs instead of yearly DGs? Because MDG is too far. Okay, interesting observation there. MDGs are benefiting the rich because we are not seeing the result from the time you started lecturing us. Saidi Piri from Chilabombo, that is obviously the copper belt. The political system is so rough that a woman will have to think twice to join politics. Example, to silence a woman who is vocal, men will threaten to rape her. Lucy's now Nawakwi. Okay, I think we are aware of that particular case going on. A couple of SMS diverse views there, but quickly, Kanni, what I'm getting out there again, it's this misconception or a belief that some of these the feeling I'm getting from 2 or 3 of those SMSs is that some of these discussions, even if they talk about eradication of poverty and achievement of universal primary education, the people themselves who are in poverty are not being considered. Somebody there is saying probably this is a discussion just for other people and not us, the people in the villages. Is this the feeling you get through consultations and evaluation of the work on the ground?
You know, some of it is true that there's a lot of the discussions that happen globally and nationally. But I would say that in every village, certainly in countries I've worked in, there are constant daily conversations on what is it that will make my life better. How do I get my kid to school? Can I avoid my second child dying of malaria? How do I get, if I'm pregnant and want to deliver, how do I get to somewhere where there's a trained birth attendant? So it's a matter of translating language of the MDGs to what matters for daily life. And I think people are constantly talking about and thinking about how to, if not to improve their lot, how to improve the lot for their children. So these conversations, I would say, are not confined to urban centers or to the United Nations or to... There are conversations happening in every family, rich or poor. So it's the titles and the labels one gives the targets, that's one thing. Because one has to pursue how to report on them, how to put budgets behind them, etc. But I would say that it's a conversation happening at every level. That's on the MDGs. The question is, can one translate those conversations to make sure that one's government and one's representative leaders make a change and help make a change? But it's not just about what governments can deliver. We as people as well can take some things into our own hands.
Taking from one of the questions there, I know somebody asked to say, why not have annual MDGs and not these Millennium Goals that are too far off? But let me ask it in this way. How have we, as a world, or probably even as countries, been evaluating performances and, you know, areas towards these goals from the launch in 2000 towards the set deadline of this? Obviously, we're not saying that by 2015 all these